And we hear from Diana's sister, but she and others in the family are commemorating her death, speaking candidly about their grief from 20 years ago.
Princess Diana's sister has finally confirmed all the rumors. For decades, rumors have swirled around Princess Diana's life, her struggles, and the mysteries that followed even after her passing. And from royal conflicts to hidden truths, the speculations about it never faded. Now, at 60, Diana's sister, Sarah McCorquodale, has finally decided to speak out, confirming what many have suspected for years. What did she reveal? And how does it change everything we thought we knew? Join us as we uncover the truth behind the long-standing rumors surrounding the late Princess Diana. The truth about the rumors. Princess Diana and her elder sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, shared a bond rooted in their aristocratic upbringing. They grew up in a world of wealth and privilege, but their childhood was far from perfect. They were born into the aristocratic Spencer family, one of the most well-connected families in Britain, and they spent their early years at Althorp House, their grand ancestral estate. From the outside, their lives seemed luxurious, but behind closed doors, they faced emotional struggles that shaped them in different ways. Diana was the third daughter of John Spencer, Viscount Althorp, and Frances Spencer, Viscountess Althorp. She had two older sisters, Sarah and Jane, and a younger brother, Charles. The family lived at Park House, a home on the Sandringham estate, which was leased from the late Queen Elizabeth II. This meant that from a young age, Diana and her siblings were closely connected to the royal family. But while their surroundings were grand, their home life was filled with tension and struggles. Their parents' marriage had different problems, and by the time Diana was 6, everything fell apart. John and Frances went through a bitter and very public divorce, which deeply affected Diana and her siblings. She felt abandoned and struggled with feelings of loneliness. Unlike her early years when both her parents were still around, she now had to face the reality of a broken home. Sarah, as the eldest sibling, stepped in and tried to be a source of support for Diana, even though she knew no one could fully replace the love and security a young child needed from both parents. After the divorce, things became even more complicated. At first, Diana and her siblings lived with their mother in London, but a court ruling eventually sent them back to live with their father at Althorp House, as their mother lost custody of them. However, their mother's absence created a deep wound in Diana's heart, and over time, their relationship became strained. Frances remarried, which only widened the gap between them. Diana longed for a mother's affection, but she felt like she had lost that connection forever. At Althorp House, life was both beautiful and isolating. The massive estate had stunning gardens and impressive architecture, but it was also a place where Diana often felt alone. Her father, though loving in his own way, was not as emotionally expressive, and the absence of her mother left a void that Diana carried with her for the rest of her life. Growing up, Diana, Sarah, Jane, and Charles spent a lot of time together. They were raised in a strict but privileged environment, where they were expected to behave like proper members of the aristocracy. But despite the formal setting, the relationship between the siblings was still very normal. Sarah, who is the oldest, naturally took on a leadership role, while Jane was more reserved and independent. Charles, being the youngest and the only boy, was treated differently, as he was the heir to the Spencer title. And Diana, who was stuck in the middle, often felt like she had to find her own way. Even though they had each other, Diana felt different from her siblings. She was more sensitive and emotional, and she often kept her feelings to herself. While Sarah and Jane were confident and outgoing, Diana was shy and unsure of herself. She wanted to be loved and accepted, but she didn't always feel like she belonged. Furthermore, Diana was initially homeschooled under the supervision of her governess, Gertrude Allen, before attending Silfield Private School in Norfolk, before moving on to Riddlesworth Hall School, a preparatory school near Thetford. When she was 9, she joined her sisters at West Heath Girls' School in Kent. But while Sarah and Jane managed well in school, Diana struggled academically. She failed her O-level exams twice, which made her feel inadequate compared to her siblings. However, Diana had strengths that went beyond the classroom. She had a deep love for music and dance, and she was especially passionate about ballet and tap dancing. These activities gave her a sense of joy and self-expression that she couldn't always find elsewhere. She was also a talented pianist and had a natural grace that made her stand out, and despite her academic struggles, her kindness and compassion set her apart. She had an instinct for helping others and a deep understanding of people's emotions, which she was later called the People's Princess because of that kindness. At West Heath, Diana was recognized for her caring nature and received an award for her community spirit. She was someone who could connect with anyone, whether it was a struggling classmate or a staff member. She had a warmth that made people feel safe and understood, even at a young age. And by the time she turned 16, Diana's formal education was coming to an end. She briefly attended Institut Alpin Vidamanet, a finishing school in Switzerland, but it didn't last long. After just one term, she returned to London ready to start a new chapter in her life. And unlike many aristocratic young women who relied on their family wealth, Diana wanted to work and create her own identity. Moving into a shared flat with two school friends, Diana took on various jobs to support herself. She worked as a dance instructor for children, a nanny for an American family, and later as a nursery assistant at the Young England School in Pimlico. These jobs might have seemed ordinary, but they reflected Diana's deep love for children and her natural ability to care for others. Even before she became a princess, she was already showing the qualities that made her beloved around the world. However, despite her independent streak, Diana remained close to her siblings, especially Sarah. The bond they shared from childhood never fully faded, even as their lives took different paths. Sarah was always there, offering quiet support when Diana needed it, though she rarely spoke about their relationship in public. Diana's life was moving in a new direction, but she had no idea how much it was about to change. In 1977, when she was just 16, she met Prince Charles for the first time. This happened at Althorp House, where Charles was visiting as a guest. At the time, Diana was just a shy teenager, and Charles was already a well-known figure in Britain. Their first encounter was brief, but it shaped the future in ways no one could have predicted. And after a few years, their paths crossed again, and this time, everything changed. Diana had grown into a young woman, and Charles saw her in a new light. They started dating, and their relationship quickly became one of the most talked about royal romances in history, capturing the attention of the entire world. But here is the most intriguing part: Prince Charles' relationship with the Spencer siblings. Before Prince Charles started dating Diana, he dated her older sister, Sarah. Sarah is 6 years older than Diana, and in the late 1970s, she briefly had a relationship with Charles. However, their romance didn't last, and she supported her sister's relationship with Charles. Later, Sarah took credit for introducing Diana to him. As she told The Guardian, "I introduced them. I'm Cupid." By the summer of 1980, Charles had started taking Diana more seriously. They were both invited to a country weekend, and that was when he first showed a real interest in her. Soon after, he invited her aboard the royal yacht Britannia for a sailing trip. Then, he took her to Balmoral Castle to meet his family. The Queen, Prince Philip, and the Queen Mother all approved of her, so Charles continued courting her. On February 6, 1981, he proposed at Windsor Castle. Diana said yes, but they kept it a secret for more than 2 weeks. And on February 24, 1981, they finally announced their engagement. Once she became Charles's fiancée, Diana left her job as a nursery assistant and moved into Clarence House, the Queen Mother's residence. Later, she moved into Buckingham Palace, where she felt incredibly lonely. According to biographer Ingrid Seward, Diana struggled with the isolation and pressure. Even though she was marrying the future king, she suddenly had very little freedom. Still, she made history in many ways. She was the first English woman in over 300 years to marry the heir to the throne. She was also the first royal bride to have had a paying job before her engagement. Her first official appearance with Charles happened in March 1981 at a charity ball, where she met Princess Grace of Monaco. After a few months, on July 29, 1981, She officially became the Princess of Wales when she married Charles at St. Paul's Cathedral. The wedding was one of the biggest events in history. About 600,000 people lined the streets to see her, and 750 million people watched the ceremony on television. But despite how magical everything seemed, there were small signs of tension. At the altar, Diana accidentally said Philip Charles instead of Charles Philip. She also left out the traditional vow to obey her husband, which was an unusual choice at the time. Also, her wedding dress was valued at £9,000, and it had a 25-foot train. After the ceremony, the Queen welcomed Diana into the family by lending her the Queen Mary's Lover's Knot tiara. Charles and Diana moved into Kensington Palace and Highgrove House, but behind the glamour and their smiles, their marriage was already struggling. By November 1981, Diana was pregnant, but in January 1982, when she was only 12 weeks along, she fell down the stairs at Sandringham. She later admitted that she had thrown herself down in frustration and despair. She was also bruised in the process, but the baby was unharmed. On June 21, 1982, she gave birth to Prince William.
Less than 24 hours after his birth, the little prince made his first public appearance.
Afterward, she suffered from postpartum depression, which wasn't openly discussed at the time. She felt overwhelmed, but she was determined to raise her son differently than previous royals. When William was just a baby, Diana insisted on taking him with her on her first major overseas tour to Australia and New Zealand. Usually, royal babies stayed home, but Diana refused to leave him behind. People loved this decision because it made her seem more like a modern mother. And on September 15, 1984, she gave birth to Prince Harry.
Princess Diana, with Prince Charles at her side, gave birth Saturday to their second son.
Diana later stated that she and Charles had been closest during her pregnancy with Harry, but after he was born, their marriage quickly fell apart again. Charles had wanted a daughter, so when Diana realized she was carrying another boy, she kept it a secret until the birth. She also stated that Charles's reaction hurt her deeply, and their relationship became even colder after that. Diana took full control of how her children were raised. She chose their names, dismissed a royal nanny she didn't like, and hired her own. She also decided on their schools, clothes, and daily schedules. Unlike other royal parents, she took them to school herself whenever she could. However, by 1987, the media had picked up on the growing tension in Charles and Diana's marriage. They rarely looked happy together, and the press started calling them the Glums. Then, in 1989, Diana finally confronted Camilla at a party for Camilla's sister. By 1986, Charles had resumed his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. Around the same time, Diana started an affair with James Hewitt, her riding instructor. Because Harry and Hewitt had similar red hair, rumors spread that Hewitt was Harry's real father. But Hewitt denied it, saying his relationship with Diana started 2 years after Harry was born. On December 9, 1992, Prime Minister John Major officially announced that Charles and Diana had separated. They stayed legally married, but they no longer lived together. Diana later revealed that she had once been deeply in love with someone in her security team, Barry Manicky, and when he was suddenly transferred, she was devastated. Years later, in secretly recorded tapes, she stated she had been ready to leave everything behind, just to be with him. And as the separation dragged on, Diana grew more suspicious of Charles's personal life. In 1993, she wrote a letter to her butler, Paul Burrell, claiming that Charles was in love with his personal assistant, Tiggy Legabork. She also feared that Charles wanted her dead so he could marry Tiggy. There was no evidence to support this, but it showed how deeply anxious and distrustful Diana had become. By 1994, Charles finally admitted in a televised interview that he had been unfaithful to Diana. He claimed he had only started his affair with Camilla after his marriage had irretrievably broken down. That same year, a book about Diana's affair with Hewitt was published. Then, in 1995, Diana gave her own interview to Panorama. That was when she famously stated that there were 3 of them in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded for her. However, The Queen had had enough. So in December 1995, she told Charles and Diana to finalize their divorce, and by August 28, 1996, the divorce was official. Diana lost her title of Her Royal Highness, but she remained the Princess of Wales. Despite everything, Charles and Diana co-parented their sons. Diana stayed close to her family, including her sisters. Sarah, the one who had first dated Charles, always supported her, and she was always there for Diana whenever she needed her. But all this didn't end here. Stay as we delve more into this. The bond between Princess Diana and her sister, Lady Sarah. A year later, on August 31, 1997, Diana tragically died in a car crash in Paris. The world was in shock when the news went out. People couldn't believe that someone so young, kind, and full of life was suddenly gone. Her tragic car crash in Paris left millions mourning, but no one felt the loss more deeply than her family. Among them was her sister, Lady Sarah, who had always been more than just a sibling to Diana. She was her confidant, her protector, and in many ways, the one person Diana could always rely on. After the accident, Prince Charles immediately flew to France to bring Diana's body home. Despite their complicated past, he made sure she was honored with a royal funeral. He was seen walking behind her coffin with their sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, which became one of the most heartbreaking moments in history. But there was someone else in the crowd who played an important role that day, and that was Lady Sarah. She stood before the world, grieving her sister, and made sure Diana's memory was honored. Sarah had always been a major influence in Diana's life, even when they were young. And once Diana became a princess, her life changed forever, and so did the way people treated her. Suddenly, she was in the spotlight, constantly followed by the media, and expected to live up to the impossible standards of royal life. This was where Sarah became more than just a sister. She became Diana's emotional anchor. When Diana's marriage to Charles began to fall apart, it was Sarah who provided a shoulder to lean on. And as many rumors swirled about Diana's relationships and personal struggles, Sarah remained by her side. Some even believe that Sarah supported Diana's decision to break free from the rigid expectations of royal life and live on her own terms. Many who were close to the family suspected that Sarah knew about Diana's relationships outside of her marriage and may have even encouraged her to embrace her freedom. Diana herself had once described Sarah as the one person she could always trust, which showed how deep their connection really was. Even after Diana's tragic passing, Sarah continued to honor her sister's legacy. She was named co-executor of Diana's will, making sure her wishes were carried out, and she also became the president of the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund. This was a role she held until the organization closed in 2012. Through these efforts, Sarah ensured that Diana's humanitarian work and charitable contributions would never be forgotten. Outside of her connection to Diana, Sarah lived a relatively private life. She and her husband, Neil McCorquodale, settled in Lincolnshire, where they raised their 3 children, Emily, George, and Celia. In 2009, Sarah even served as the High Sheriff of Lincolnshire, a role that reflected her continued commitment to public service. But despite her more reserved lifestyle, Sarah still carried a bit of her rebellious spirit. When she turned 60, her friends and family celebrated with a cake shaped like a packet of silk-cut cigarettes, a playful nod to her longtime love of smoking. It was clear that even as she aged, Sarah had no plans of letting go of her fun-loving nature. And though Diana was gone, her influence remained strong within the Spencer family. Sarah and their other sister, Lady Jane Fellows, continued to be deeply involved in the lives of Prince William and Prince Harry. They were present at both of their weddings, supporting them as they stepped into new chapters of their lives, and even attended the christening of Harry's son Archie in 2019. Harry, in particular, felt a deep connection to his mother's side of the family. He had always taken pride in his Spencer heritage, and many believed that he resembled the Spencers in both appearance and personality. Those who knew the family well often described them as outspoken, emotional, and guided by their hearts rather than logic. Yet these are traits that Harry himself had displayed throughout his life. On her 60th birthday, Sarah openly spoke about her relationship with Diana. For years, there had been speculation about their dynamic, with some believing there was rivalry between them, but she made it clear that there was never any competition. She had always felt proud of Diana and had no reason to envy her. She also reflected on how difficult it had been to watch Diana struggle in the royal family. She had been there for Diana during some of the lowest moments of her life, offering support when Diana felt isolated. The bond they shared was much deeper than that of regular siblings. They were best friends, and even decades after Diana's passing, Sarah still missed her every single day. One of the most painful memories Sarah carried was the night Diana died. To this day, she remained haunted by certain unanswered questions, especially the fact that Diana wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Diana had always been careful about safety, and Sarah found it strange that she hadn't buckled up that night. The accident had only one survivor, which was Diana's bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, who had been wearing a seatbelt. A 2008 inquest determined that the accident was caused by their chauffeur, Henri Paul, who had been driving under the influence. However, it also concluded that not wearing a seatbelt had contributed to Diana's death. Sarah also stated how difficult it had been to hear the early news reports after the crash. The media initially stated that Diana was injured but expected to recover. Meanwhile, her family already knew she had passed away. It was painful to hear people holding on to hope when they were privately grieving the truth. Though years have passed, Sarah continues to keep Diana's memory alive. She doesn't often speak publicly, but when she does, it's always with deep love and admiration for the sister she lost. Diana may no longer be here, but through Sarah's actions and the strong bond of the Spencer family, her legacy remains as powerful as ever. So, what is the most memorable thing about Diana's legacy for you? And do you think Diana's story would have ended differently if she had more protection that night? Drop it in the comment section below. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.